Between December 2006 and August 3, 2007, a baby boy named Peter Connelly suffered tremendous abuse from his caregivers. Peter's final months of his short life were brutal and violent. This defenseless baby was alone. He had no one to fight for him, to save him. How could anyone do what they did to this little boy? Their punishment? Can you call it justice? What is true justice for Peter? Are you ready to know what happened? Let's get started. Peter Connelly was born on March 1st, 2006 in London. His mother was Tracey Connelly. Tracey came from a dysfunctional household, but calling it a household would be an overstatement. Like her mother, Tracey was on her own growing up. According to her mother, Tracey was bullied as a child. However, surprisingly, Tracey being bullied was her fault because Tracey was a strong girl. Tracey was described as moody and promiscuous. She was placed in a boarding school in West Sussex that catered for children with social and emotional difficulties. Tracey never had a father figure, so it's not surprising. At just 16 years old, she met a man, 17 years her senior, who would become her husband and the father of her 4 children. What is surprising is a man in his 30s being in a relationship with a minor. The man cooked, cleaned, washed Tracey's clothes, and according to Tracey's mother, he wasn't violent. Tracey and her husband took in a young girl who was having problems at home. The young girl would help around the house. Later on, the same girl eventually became the partner of Tracey's husband. The marriage between Tracey and the father of her children ended shortly after Peter was born. Why? Tracey met Steven Barker, and Steven was always around. Tracey took Steven to a school reunion party, and Tracey's husband had enough. He left. November 2006, Tracey's new beau moved in. According to Tracey's mother, in the beginning, Steven enjoyed being with Peter. He played with him, took him to the park. After a while, Tracey's mother noticed Peter was afraid of Steven. She asked Tracey about it, and Tracey dismissed it, saying Peter was afraid of Steven's height. Well, witnesses stated Steven trained Peter like a dog. Tracey's mother stated Tracey had a habit of getting fed up with the children. Initially, she was a doting mother, but eventually she got bored. By the time Steven was living with Tracey, Tracey was bored with Peter. From December 2006 to August 2007, Peter was seen by London Borough of Haringey Children's Services and the NHS health professionals. Peter's ordeal was documented throughout the time. Many opportunities were missed. The consequences were devastating, and the truth, a true horror. In December 2006, Peter was taken to be seen by a GP. The doctor noticed significant injuries in Peter's little body and face. When confronted about it, Tracey stated it had been her mother who had done it while Peter was in her care. Tracey and her mother were arrested on suspicions of child abuse. One thing Tracey left out while talking to the authorities, she didn't tell them Steven was living at the house. Baby Peter was placed with a family friend. Despite what it seemed a clear case of child abuse, Peter was returned to Tracey in January 2007. All of them moved into a new house in Tottenham. However, Tracey still hadn't told authorities nor agencies Steven was also living with them. Tracey, who had grown apart from Peter, only had eyes for Steven. She also, in a successful attempt to mislead social workers, joined a mellow parenting group. After a missed opportunity to remove Peter from Tracey's care, in February 2007, a former social worker sent a letter to the Secretary of Health which contained an allegation child protection procedures were not being followed in Haringey. The secretary did nothing. She forwarded the letter to the Department of Children, Schools and Families. The Haringey Council took an injunction against the social worker, banning her from speaking about childcare in Haringey. It was clear children had no protection. Baby Peter's terrifying and short journey continued. April 2007, baby Peter was seen again, and once again with bruises on his face. He had neck pain and head lice. In May 2007, Tracey was arrested again. In June 2007, a social worker saw marks on Peter. The social worker suspected child abuse and contacted authorities. On June 4th, 2007, Peter was placed with a friend for safeguarding. It was obvious the violence against Peter was escalating. Peter needed to be rescued, but unfortunately, no one saved him. No one cared. Later that month, Jason Owen, Steven's brother, moved in with his children, whom he treated like his possessions, and also his 15-year-old minor girlfriend. Jason was actually fleeing the family of the minor. Jason and Steven had a criminal background and were pure trouble. Jason bullied and abused Steven as a child. Steven liked to torture animals, skinning frogs alive and break their legs. In 1995, Jason and Steven moved in with their grandmother and made her life a living hell. There were charges of assault against them. However, the charges were dropped when she died. Jason had convictions of arson, burglary, and he was also accused of assaulting a 13-year-old child. Jason had been a member of the National Front, and Steven was obsessed with Nazis. Throughout the month of July, Peter was seen by several people, and Peter was ravaged by injuries. Nothing was off limits in Peter's little body, which experienced horrific trauma from head to toe. Behind the scenes, on July 25th, Haringey Council decided Peter did not meet the threshold for initiating care proceedings. On the same day, an official failed to attend a meeting that would decide if it was necessary to remove Peter from Tracey's care. July 27, Peter stayed the night with his father, who was assured by Tracey Peter's injuries were not serious. One would question if seeing a child covered with injuries wasn't serious enough to take action. Once again, Peter was failed. July 30th, Peter had bruises covered in chocolate. On August 1st, Peter was seen at St. Anne's Hospital in North London by a pediatrician replacement who didn't detect Peter's spinal cord injury. August 2nd, Tracey was informed she wouldn't be prosecuted. August 3rd, Tracey called an ambulance. Peter was found in his cot, only in diapers and blue. They tried to resuscitate Peter. He was taken to the hospital. Tracey went with them. However, Peter was dead. Tracey was arrested, and at the time she was pregnant with Steven's baby. An autopsy was performed, and it showed 22 injuries all over his body, 10 to the head, face, and ears, 5 injuries to the back and chest, 3 injuries to his hands, 4 injuries to his legs and feet. 1 toenail seemed to have been deliberately removed. However, they couldn't tell which injury had caused the death of Peter Connelly, but suspected it was due to a tooth he had ingested, which may have caused to his upper spine to bleed. Tracey, Steven, and Jason all denied being responsible for the death of baby Peter. They all denied causing the injuries and also claimed they knew nothing about them or didn't see anyone inflict them. In that house where baby Peter was brutally treated lived Tracey, her 4 children, Steven, Jason, Jason's 3 children, Jason's 15-year-old girlfriend, 3 dogs, and snakes. Authorities found inside the house hardcore pornography, internet chat sites, vodka bottles, attack dogs, animal feces, fleas, lice, Nazi paraphernalia, knives, and replica of guns. On September 9th, 2008, Tracey pled guilty to allowing Peter's death but not causing it. November 11, 2008, Steven and Jason were found guilty of causing or allowing Peter's death. They were cleared of murder because there weren't enough evidence. On April 2009, Steven faced charges of assaulting a 2-year-old victim, and he had inflicted indecent acts on the victim. During trial, Tracey looked bored and oblivious when the jury wasn't there. But when the jury was there, she would put on an anxious face. Steven seemed detached. On May 1st, 2009, Steven was found guilty of assault and Tracey not guilty of child cruelty. On May 22nd, 2009, they all received their sentences for the crimes they were found guilty of. The maximum sentence for allowing or causing the death of a child, surprisingly, 14 years. Steven was sentenced to 10 years for the assault and 12 years for allowing Peter's death. These two sentences were to be served at the same time. In 2017, Steven was denied parole. Tracey was described as vocal, smart, and articulate. She was also manipulative, calculating, self-centered, who prevented Peter from being seen by social services and deceived authorities and only cared about her relationship with Steven. Tracey was sentenced to 10 years, 5 years mandatory because of the plea. Tracey was released in 2013. She returned in 2015 for breaching parole and was then released again in July 2022. Jason Owen was sentenced to 6 years, 3 in custody. He was released in 2011, but later on he returned to prison. Haringey Council initiated an internal audit to avoid facing scrutiny. They kept the full report confidential and released a summary of it. However, on March 15, 2009, the Mail on Sunday reported they had details of the report and that the executive summary held details on how the case was handled. It stated the case was grossly mishandled by officials. There were missed meetings, delayed meetings, miscommunication between officials. Officials didn't follow through with obtaining an interim care order that would have removed Peter from his home. They had argued there were legal grounds for it 6 months before Peter died. A consultant pediatrician stated she and 3 colleagues had written an open letter detailing the problems in 2006. She claimed Peter could have been saved if managers had listened to the fears raised by senior doctors. The consequences for what happened to Peter were 3 council workers were given written warnings about their actions. The GP who examined Peter was suspended for 18 months. The pediatrician replacement who failed to detect Peter's injury was suspended and then her contract was terminated. The head of children's services at Haringey Castle was dismissed. She embarked on a legal battle which eventually paid off. 1 council leader resigned. A cabinet member of children and young people resigned. The deputy of direction of children's services was dismissed. 2 managers were dismissed and a social worker was dismissed. In the end, can we all say Peter was vindicated? Absolutely not.